My name's Rob Wakely, and I'm your presenter today. I was around when the PCs first appeared in businesses, and I realized. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, just real quick.
Yeah.
Shameless plug.
Okay.
Hey guys, thanks again for coming. And yeah, again, Sean Wakely's my name. I am maybe related to the guy up here. But the one thing I wanted to say is, growing up, my brother Jesse, who's actually at the door there as well, we were very fortunate that our dad brought the personal computer into our home at a very early age. And, here I am today, it's a big part of my life. And Rob was the uncle that he was always kind of doing stuff with computers. And I remember it's like a very old memory. We go to Texas, we had like a layover. We hang out with Rob one night and he's like, well, do you guys want to like play some video games? And he like opens his closet. And that was when video games came in those big boxes, and he's this huge stack. And Jesse and I got to load up games and play. And I so fondly remember that. And so, Rob, you were part of it, really showing us the way, being that nerd. So thanks, Rob. Have fun. And we will have a mic for Q&A that Jesse can pass around at the end.
Okay. All right. And Jesse, keep me on track if I'm dawdling so I can keep on time here. But just to give you a little background, I was in college until 1982 at Northeastern University, and they made you take a computer course. And a computer course was you did a program on punch cards and handed in the punch card to the guy, and you got your printout the next day. I failed that class. I never was able to do the punch card thing correctly. So it was a work study program. I was getting an accounting degree, so I'm working for a management consulting firm. And what they were doing is they were doing new business ventures and financial projections. And the way you did financial projections back then was that you had green spreadsheets and pencils and 10 keys, and you hand wrote stuff out, did manual calculations, and then someone that could typed up what you put on the green sheet. So we would do a 12-month projection for a business, full financial statements and cash flow, and that would take about a week and there'd be about a team of 5 to 6 people to do 12 months worth of financials projected out for a week. And he'd finish and everything be perfect, no typos. And someone would come down and say, we need to increase the receivable turn rate, so you need to do it all over again. So it would take another week for one change. And we're always up against a deadline. So that's what it looked like. And one day, a guy came in with an Apple II, and everyone made fun of him. He sat in a corner by himself. I can't remember his name, but I remember how it looked. I was fascinated. Everybody else made fun of him because the rule was PCs are toys. They're not serious. And I went and asked him if I could look at what he was doing, and he had a program called VisiCalc. And he was entering spreadsheets on there, and no one was taking him seriously. We were still back with the pens and the pencils. And VisiCalc was the first spreadsheet that was available. And there was so little memory. Commands, you would hit like a forward stroke bar, and up would come a bunch of letters. Like, it didn't say file, it just said F, because there wasn't enough memory to do FILE. And the other thing that was interesting about it was that there was so little memory in the machines. If you did a spreadsheet, you could do 12 months and maybe 6 or 8 lines, and then you run out of memory. Let's see. Yep, I already said that. But when I saw it and I realized, holy crap, if I make a change, I just key in a number and hit enter and not have to work for a week. This was my reaction. Whoa, this was my reaction, yes. Holy crap. The only thing that stood between me and getting it done was the older people just didn't take it seriously. So we were slowly working our way, trying to get them to take us seriously. Here's some interesting details. I think it was 16K RAM, I talked about the small spreadsheets. So what you had to do a full set of financials is you did like one file with that had calculation results at the bottom. Then you had to manually move those calculation results to the top of the next spreadsheet. And you can do it there was a way to extract just a row and save it as a file, combine it on the next one. And to do a full set of financials, it would take like 45 minutes of swapping out floppy disks and saving and combining. So it took 45 minutes. It sounds insane today, right? Because it takes 1 second today. But it was a week's worth of work was being done in 45 minutes. It was absolutely incredible. They still referred to the Apple II as a toy and wouldn't take it seriously. Wait a second. So what happened to make them take it seriously was one day a big box was brought in and it had the key letters, IBM on the side. And suddenly overnight, everyone took it seriously. Because mainstream business people did not take Apple seriously, but they sure as hell took IBM seriously. They've been giving money to IBM for decades. And they said, oh, if IBM makes one, it must work. And they said, you can keep doing this only if you use the IBM. And so it was the good luck having IBM read my VisiCalc spreadsheets off Apple. They hired some genius. I don't know where they found him, but probably someone a lot like many of you listen to this. He came with a customized RS-232 cable. He hooked up the two computers and he ran some kind of secret program. And suddenly all my Apple files were converted to DOS, and I could use the IBM PC. And overnight, it changed the way we did business in that company. So that was pretty exciting. But they stopped making fun of me and that guy. So on to the late 80s. I was working for the corporate office for Kay Jewelers. There were 400 stores nationwide, and believe it or not, over half the sales were people adding on to their Kay Jewelers credit card. Half the sales. It was huge. And we would use microfiche records. And I can't remember now, it's either every month or every 2 weeks, we would send these boxes of microfiche out to 400 stores. And they had a microfiche reader, and they would see what the person's balance was and what their credit limit was, and if they had open to buy. And they would make credit decisions that way. And Kay Jewelers was losing their ass because of that. And you can imagine. So when I came on, I was a credit accounting guy. They said, we're going to have to start having people call in. And there was a mainframe program with they created some little screen that we could see data on, but it was live data. So the stores would have to call in, 400 stores. So we were going to have to hire 50, 60 people to answer the phones. And one day, does anybody know what that is? It's a microfiche reader. Some people came in from a company called Scintillect. And Scintillect, this was the birth of voice response units that you're all familiar with today, but they didn't exist back then, where you call in and you get an electronic answer and you interact with the computer by phone. And we've all grown to hate that, right? But this was one of the first ones, and they had no idea what we were doing, and they called it screen scraping. You can call in and you can read back information to them. And I'm like, really? And so we're in a conference room with the salesperson and the engineer, and I'm thinking, I said, can this thing do math? And the salesperson said, no. And the engineer goes, yeah, absolutely. Okay. And I'm thinking further, my mind is turning around, and I said, well, can it send a transaction back, do a calculation, take the result and send it back? And the salesperson said, no. And the engineer said, hell yeah, sure, I can do that. So I realized that this machine, with a very simple program and the screen scraping technology and building a very basic interface, I could do what I was going to pay those 60 people to do. In other words, I can look at what their payment history is, write an algorithm for, if they've been with us a long time and they've paid on time, double their credit limit. And so my answer is like, do I have the right screen here? Went through the dialogue. The RIT guy also said I can do it. And I ended up with, I'll take 20 units. And the salesperson just about fell off his chair. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was huge. But didn't have to hire like 60 people. Neiman Marcus Stores. Flash forward to 1992. Neiman Marcus Stores. How many stores did we have? 29. In 29 stores. Our cash registers were going to be replaced by IBM PCs. And there wasn't a lot of planning on how we were going to leverage that technology. Again, I was in the credit department. And one of the things that was really difficult was the process of accepting checks. Okay, for you younger people, checks were these pieces of paper from the bank that you sign and fill out. Okay. So back in the day, when you wrote a check, it could be a very difficult process, especially if it was with a retailer that didn't know you. So you'd bring up the sale, it's $500, you'd write a check, and the procedure was they'd take the check, they'd take your driver's license, they'd fill out a bunch of stuff, write a bunch of stuff on the check, and they'd pick up the phone and they'd call somebody. And who they're calling is a check guarantee company that would, for a fee, you give them the information on the check and they'll guarantee that check for like X% of the face value of the check. And they'd ask for the name and they'd ask for the address, and they have databases that they look up. And if they felt good about it, they'd say yes. And if they didn't feel good about it, they say no, and it was up to you whether to just take your chances or not. But usually if they're not going to take a chance, neither are you. So you're going to say, I'm sorry, I can't take your check. And that pissed people off. But what really pissed people off, even the ones we said yes to, is that whole process of picking up the phone and giving out that information. That would turn into a 10 or 15-minute transaction. So we were losing sales because of it. We were losing our ass on check losses because we were saying yes when the check guarantee company would say no. And if we didn't do everything perfect with the check guarantee company and they took a loss, they'd charge us back for it. It was a serious problem. So I did some research into taking checks and how checks work. And one of the first things I found out was real checks there's numbers at the bottom, the routing number and your account number. They're called micro numbers, MICR. It's micro ink character recognition. It's a very specific mixture of magnetic ink on a real check, and fake ones don't have that. And I found out there's a device that you could run the check through to check that level to see if it's real. And those things could plug into a port on a PC. I said, ooh, what if we got one of those? And what if we took what was on the check, the name and the address, and just typed it into the computer and cut this guarantee company out and do it ourselves? And there was like, what are you going to do yourself? I said, well, let's take that information and get a credit score. That's when credit scores were brand new. And people said, well, you can't do that. What do you mean I can't do that? You need their permission. I said, actually, I looked into that. You don't. Federal law says that I can run a credit report on you if I'm engaged in a business transaction with you. You don't need your permission. So you write me a check, you're having a business transaction with me. So what happened was we wrote our own proprietary program that it ran the check through, verified those numbers. You put the person's name and address in there once the first time, and then it creates a record that's held onto, and it goes out, gets that credit score. If it's a good credit score, it establishes a check writing limit. And these 10-15-minute transactions turned into less than a minute transactions. Guess what happened to check sales? They went up. Guess what happened to check losses? They went down, right? Guess what happened to expenses for check guarantee companies? It went away, all right? And this was unprecedented. My boss called me into his office about 3 months later and said, and they never do this, he gave me an envelope and he said, we want to give you this check for $5,000 because it's worked out so well. And it was all because of there's a new piece of technology And there was a business process. And you had to figure out, what can the technology do, right? And how does that fit into the way we're doing things now, right? And when you do that, you run into people objecting to it because it's new. You run into people telling you what the rules are, right? You know, one of the big rules here was, on the prior story, a rule was PCs aren't reliable. Apples are toys. It's like a shiny red apple. It's a toy. They're not reliable. They're not accurate. That was a rule, right? A rule here is that you can't run credit reports on people that are writing you checks. You can't accept checks without using one of the national check guarantee companies. All these rules that I wanted to break, and that people in power said, you know, you can't do that. So spent a lot of time trying to prove that, yeah, you can do that. Oh, I'm going too fast. I'm going way too fast. I did right over that. Big bonus pay to yours truly. I told you about that. This is a thing I wanted to show you, and I apologize if you showed that. Everybody's heard thinking outside the box, right? Does everybody know where that comes from? All right, I'm going to explain to you where that comes from. And it was kind of, it was a thing back in those years that they would teach you in leadership seminars. And it was a puzzle exercise, and it's 9 dots. And the puzzle is, I want you to connect all the dots using 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. And everyone that tried it ended up with the 5th line. They couldn't do it, right? That's 5 lines to connect them all. But no matter what people tried, they couldn't do it. And I'm going to show you what the solution is. That's the solution. That's 4 lines. And what's the difference between the last slide and this slide is the lines went outside the imaginary box that everyone that looks at 9 dots creates in their head. There is no box there. It's 9 dots. It has the suggestion of a box, but there is no box. And there is no rule that you can't go outside with the solution. What do you have to do? You have to think outside the box. And what the real translation of that to me is, you got to not believe the lie that you believe. And the lie that you believe is that there's a box. And back at Exeter Management, in my first example, the lie that people believed was that PCs are toys and they're not reliable. All right. The lies that the salesperson believed selling me that voice response unit at K Jewelers was, I can't do that kind of program. This isn't designed for that kind of sophistication. So his answer to all my questions, can it do this and that, were no and no, because he saw a box around his 9 dots. The software engineer didn't. The software engineer knew what was possible. He was able to see outside that box, and he was able to say yes. My IT guy saw it too, and he was able to say yes. All right, and then the major one at K Jewelers was, oh, you can't use the credit. You can't get a credit score, and it's not legal. You can't do it. You need their permission, and that's never been true. But universally in the business that I was in, and the credit executives that have been there for decades all believed something that wasn't true. It's not something that changed. It's something that was never true. It was a lie that everybody believed, right? And in everything, not just technology, innovation happens when you really examine your assumptions and you examine the rules that you're living under and find out which ones are true and which ones aren't true. Sometimes the hard part is to figure out what are your rules anyway? What rules am I operating under that are constraining my decision making? All right. Since then, I've changed careers. I'm a mental health therapist, and I've been doing that for about 15 years. And when I help people, my specialty is like midlife crisis stuff and people nearing retirement. But one of the themes is that I help people to understand these rules that they've been living under their whole lives, that they're really not, they're not aware that they even exist, yet they're following them, that almost operate subconsciously. Like if you ask those people at Neiman Marcus about, when did you consider the question about needing permission to run written permission, a customer's permission to run a credit report, they wouldn't be able to tell you where that originated or where that came from. Because for most people, it wasn't a conscious thought process. It was a subconscious thought process that, for whatever reason, was shared amongst most people that I worked with. And not just in that company, but across the industry. A false belief that people didn't even realize they had until they came across a circumstance that caused them to call on that rule and use that rule to decide whether or not they can move forward with a new idea. And we do that in our personal lives all the time. And it's a theme over and over again that I use with my clients is, if you have problematic decisions or problematic behavior, things that you're doing over and over again in your life, and doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, everybody's heard that. And so many people find themselves in these cycles and can't understand why I keep making the same bad decisions over and over again. And it's because you're operating under false assumptions. You're operating under things that you think are true, or think are true about yourself and the world, but they're lies. And the first step is identifying what those objections, what those false laws are. And the second one is finding a way to break them, break out of them. The best ideas that I've seen in technology are simple. These three examples I gave you saved big companies a lot of money. Very profitable, very innovative ideas, but not one of them is a complicated idea. They were all simple ideas, but no one else was doing them because everyone else was operating under these false assumptions. So how much more time did I burn up? Not much more. But we can go to questions now. Does anybody have questions?
If anyone has a question, go ahead and put your hand up. I can come around with the mic.
So Rob, I know, recently you've moved into retirement. You've become a little bit of a nomad. In the time you've spent kind of in that community, have you seen any new kind of possible problems that might, or things that you're like, oh, we might be able to fix that? Or are there any like assumptions being made out there that, people, just like you were talking about, that people are making that maybe they don't know?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question, is that I am a nomad. I retired back in December, and I drag around a 21-foot Winnebago Micro Mini with my dog and my cat, and I live on the road. And has anyone seen the movie Nomadland? Okay. Yeah. Well, have you seen that? There are at least two friends of mine that were in that movie, and that's kind of the community that I've been around down in Quartzsite, Arizona, since the first of the year, kind of living what they call boondocking in the desert. And there's a community of people that are nomads. And the question, is interesting because that lifestyle, that decision to live that way goes against a lot of rules that are out there in society that say what you can and can't do. One of the big ones is, well, you got to have a place to live. You got to have sticks and bricks. You don't. Well, you have to pay rent. You don't need to pay rent. You need to have a full-time job to survive. You don't. You don't. You need to have $1 million to retire. You don't. Okay. People in the nomad lifestyle have discovered that there's a concept. They've discovered something really interesting about the concept of affluence. We all think about affluence in terms of money, right? The more money that you have, the more affluent you are, right? Doesn't that make sense? It's another lie. It's not true. It's only partially true. Affluence has to do with what you have versus what you need, what you have versus what you need, right? And if you require less, if you can find a way to reduce your needs, you become affluent, right? When the resources that you need, when they exceed what you need, you're affluent. You have everything that you want, right? If you have high needs, like I know what high needs are about. I worked for Dell Computer. I was a director of risk management, and I made a lot of money. And I lived in a 5-bedroom house on a golf course with a swimming pool and a half-an-acre lawn with my dog and my cat. All right. I like telling this part of it. There was like a great room on the second floor, and the only thing that would fit up there is a pool table. So I spent like $2,000 or $3,000 on a pool table, and I don't play pool. Sean played pool on that pool table, and I think that was the only time anybody played. So I created a lifestyle where I had a need. I had a need for like $5,000 or $6,000 a month to maintain my lifestyle. So I had to work at this job at Dell. I couldn't go off and reinvent myself and start a new career at the bottom because no one's going to pay me $5,000 to $6,000 to change careers. So I'm stuck at Dell to maintain my level of affluence until I found out that was a lie. Right? So I quit. I sold the house. I sold everything in the house. I went back to school. I got a master's degree. I went to work for a nonprofit, working with kids, homeless youth, and foster care youth. And I got this is the way to get a job. Let me tell you how I got this job. They were advertising for this nonprofit to work with kids. And I went in, I did the interview, and they said, "Did you have any questions?" I said, "No, I have a statement. My statement is I want this job, and you guys have two options. You can offer me this job, or I'll show up Monday and I'll do it for free." Guess what they did? They offered me the job, right? I ignored the voice in me that was telling me that I shouldn't do any of these things, that you can't do these things. I was 43 years old when that happened. And I had a very promising career at Dell. And my boss was a hard driving guy from India that was just all about work and achievement. And he was a serious guy. I liked him, but he was a serious, high-powered executive. And I was afraid to tell him about the decision that I'd made. And I remember sitting, because I was sure he was going to tell me what an idiot I was being, and I was throwing away this opportunity, and I was throwing away a lot of money, and just like I thought he was going to just, it's not what happened. I sat in a conference with him, and I explained to him what I was going to do and why I wanted to do it. And the man, I'd never seen this before, started to tear up, and he said, "You remind me of my father." He got it. He got what I was doing and why I was doing it. It was a powerful moment for me that I realized that the box doesn't exist. I made it up. All right. I worked in a business career for a lot of years, being really unhappy, trying to make myself happy within those rules that both society and I were making up about life. And I decided I'm not going to play by the rules anymore. You know, I had a really good friend of mine, and he won't mind that I tell you this. His name is Mike Ripka. And Mike was the, this is getting pretty far away from technology, but what the hell? Mike Ripka worked at Dell. He was the head guy over food services, and he and I were really close. And he hated his job too, because all Mike wanted to do was be a chef and cook and create and have his own place. And he and I quit Dell at the same time to pursue our dreams, right? I pursued mine. I became a therapist. I became a paramedic, a firefighter. I did all the things that I wanted to do my whole life, but never did because the rules said I couldn't do it, and I did them anyway. And Mike made the same leap of faith with me. And I worked for the nonprofit. Mike spent borrowed money to buy a $10,000 trailer, and he's selling tacos in downtown Austin, and he can't sell any because no one's buying tacos out of a little trailer. And he's zooming around on his little Vespa that he bought, that he wrecked the day he bought it, and giving away free tacos to try to attract people to his business. Yeah. It's called Torchy's Tacos now. And Torchy's Tacos was founded by my friend Mike, and they have over 100 stores. And in 2018, it was sold out. They offered him $400 million for Torchy's Tacos. And I just saw on Mike's Facebook page is that they want me back. The investors are hiring him back as the CEO. Because he was bored in his $6 million mansion on Mont Bonnell in Austin, Texas. And this happened to him. Mike never cared about money, and I bet he still doesn't. He's the same guy. But funny, I found out about the house, not from him, but there was an article about him in the Wall Street Journal. And Mike always kind of liked cigars, and we'd smoke cheap cigars. And in the article, they toured his mansion, and he says, "And Mike has a walk-in humidor." Like, a walk-in humidor? Are you kidding me? But what Mike did, and what I did, is we followed our passions and ignored the rules and didn't believe that the box existed, because it doesn't. It's a lie.
Hi. So, just
yeah. So, that's his father.
So my question is, I am on a mission too to reverse climate change, and I've done it in my own life. I've cut my carbon footprint by 2/3. But the point is, my question is, how do I scale that up? And there's a heck of a lot of psychology there. There's you probably heard of, the guy out of Norway. But making it fun, making it interesting, helping others question. The requirements right now, like the U.S. is selling, wants to export LNG to Europe to solve the problem when we could solve two problems with one by, So how do we scale it up, I guess, is the question. How do we use this approach
that's a great question.
To help others see the missing.
You bet. I think I have a great answer to your question. The nomad community. What does the nomad community do? The community that I'm part of. I harvest solar power for my energy needs. I don't plug in. I am in Boise, but that's a whole nother story. But when I'm boondocking, which I do 99% of the time in retirement, I'm harvesting my own solar. I've learned living in the desert to be very conservative with my use of water, right? I have a 32-gallon water tank. I have to be conscious of every drop of water that I use. I have to be conscious of the watts of electricity that I use. How's that for a carbon footprint? Pretty damn small, isn't it? And I'm in a community of people that believe in that. And I believe in it, and I talk about it when anybody will listen to me. So the word is spreading. That community is growing. Self-sufficiency is it's an amazing feeling to know that I can create my own energy, and I can conserve resources, and I'm still really comfortable. I still watch Netflix. right? I still binge watch in my trailer. I have an air conditioner. I still use that. I'm comfortable, but I have a little tiny footprint. And sir, the older gentleman had a question here.
I just wanted to ask you, Rob, just as an inspiration, how old were you when you went outside the box at Neiman Marcus and picked up a Apple II computer?
So the first story at Exeter, where I did the Apple II, I was 22, I think 21 or 22 years old. And then the Neiman Marcus story, I was about in my early 30s, 30 or 31. And then when I made my huge career change and really broke loose, I was 43. And I'm 62 now. More questions? Anything. I'll answer any question. Okay.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was great.